Hey everyone, welcome to another session of the Hormone Optimization Masterclass here at Rebel Health. I'm your host, Michael, and I am joined today by my friend and favorite pediatrician, Dr. Elisa Song. Dr. Song, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. This is such an important topic, and I'm really honored to be part of your masterclass.
Yeah, it is, and it's the only one we've got that's focused predominantly on kids. Children get brought up in some of the other presentations related to hormone imbalances and endocrine disrupting chemicals, and basically that this isn't only an adult problem, that it's also impacting kids. But this is our one presentation that's focused. The men get one, and the kids get one, and the women get about 12. But this is and I always enjoy your presentations. You always have so much actionable steps people can take, and it's always encouraging and optimistic about what people can do for their kids to give them the best shot in this kind of landmine-filled world we've created for them. And so before we get started, I'm going to give a little introduction for anybody who doesn't know about your work. Dr. Song is a MD, Stanford, NYU, UCSF, trained integrative pediatrician, pediatric functional medicine expert, and mom to two thriving children, and she's on a mission to revolutionize the future of children's health. She is the best-selling author of the Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, an Integrative Pediatrician's Guide to Whole Child Resilience book, which is fantastic. She created Healthy Happy Kids, which is healthyhappykids.com, as an online holistic pediatric resource to help practitioners and parents bridge the gap between conventional and integrative pediatrics with an evidence-based, pediatrician-backed, mom-approved approach. And in her integrative practice, she's helped thousands of kids get to the root causes of their health concerns and empowered parents to help their children thrive by integrating conventional pediatrics with functional medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and essential oils. There's more I could say, but I think I'm going to cut it there because you're a busy woman and do a lot of things, but that is where they can find you and your work. And the book is something I would recommend to everybody who has kids or knows anybody with kids. It'd make a perfect gift. And so thank you for putting out so much very easy accessed information out there for people and really empowering parents.
Thank you. Well, that is my goal as a mom and as a pediatrician. It's not just about spouting out the facts, because as we were talking offline, it can be a pretty scary feeling world out there, but we have to understand how to live in our world and thrive and help our kids thrive too. And I'm so grateful that you're having a pediatric talk, because as you said, kids' health kind of gets put on the bottom of the barrel, for a lot of, researchers, supplement companies, pharmaceutical companies. And so we need to raise awareness, because all of these health problems that adults are experiencing, well, the seeds get sowed in childhood. So it's really important. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so we're going to be talking about protecting our kids' hormonal health from PFAS, which are forever chemicals, to other endocrine disrupting chemicals. So Michael gave you an introduction to who I am, and these are the two things I'm the most proud of. My kids, who are now tweens and teens, and really teach me every single day what it means to be a humble and hopefully a great mom, and also a pediatrician. So let's talk about some of the statistics, because we're focusing on hormonal health, but for kids, it's hormones and everything else. So we don't really know the real numbers of how many kids have chronic disease nowadays. In 2021, the CDC noted that around 40%, nearly 1 in 2 kids had at least one chronic disease. Now, when you roll back time a little bit and look at a survey from 2007, that number was actually higher. Even in 2007, it was noted that 43% of U.S. kids had at least one of 20 chronic health conditions that were assessed. So back then, we were at the 43% mark. And if you included overweight, obesity, type 2 diabetes, or being at risk for developmental delays, that number went to 54.1%. And we know that those conditions have skyrocketed, especially through the pandemic. The new normal seems to be that our kids really have a number of chronic health concerns. And when we're thinking about kids' health, it ranges from their immune system with allergic phenomena, asthma, allergies, hay fever, autoimmunity, neurodevelopmental and neuropsychiatric problems, ranging from autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression. And then we have all of our hormonal imbalances, PCOS in our teenage girls, anxiety, depression. We have metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, which when I was training in residency, so I finished my residency at UCSF in 2000, so 24 years ago. Now, there was no term called type 2 diabetes. It was called adult onset diabetes. And the only kind of diabetes kids got was the autoimmune type 1 juvenile diabetes. We can no longer call it juvenile or onset or adult onset diabetes because there's so many kids whose hormonal and metabolic processes are so dysregulated that they're presenting with type 2 diabetes at very young ages. And I would really, have listeners and practitioners sort of open their minds to the populations that really are more at risk for type 2 diabetes, because I would say nowadays it's all of our kids. I'm seeing even in kids who are slim, fit looking on the outside, very athletic, very active. When I check their blood work, their fasting blood work, they have all the signs of actually heading towards type 2 diabetes or having type 2 diabetes. It is because of the way that we are living, our diet and our lifestyle, and toxicity that we're exposed to, which we're going to be talking about. And in 2005, so this is nearly 20 years ago, the New England Journal of Medicine noted that we have had over the past 1,000 years, a slow and steady increase in life expectancy. Look at all of our medical advancements and technologies. But 20 years ago, it was predicted that because of lifestyle changes, because of how we are living today, our children could be the first population in history that has shorter lifespans than us, their parents. So this really should have been an alarm, a wake-up call 20 years ago. And unfortunately, it's still not really there. We need to prioritize this. We need to understand with all of the medical advancements, the functional medicine tools that we have, the biohacking that's going on, we don't want our kids to have to biohack their longevity. We want to set the stage for longevity, I would say even before they're born, but we need to be thinking mindfully how to do that. So why is this happening? Well, there are a lot of influences in our modern world. Many have heard that we are the most overfed, undernourished populations in the world. I'm talking about the Western world, but sadly, this is true for even developing countries which are following suit with our sad standard American diet. There's a hygiene hypothesis. Our immune systems aren't getting trained. We are overusing pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, antacid medications, mood regulators, steroids that are disrupting our immune systems and disrupting our gut-brain, gut-immune system connections. There's never-ending, all day long psychological stress that is putting us into sympathetic fight or flight nonstop. And the topic of today is environmental toxicity. We are faced with more environmental toxins than ever before, and that exposure does not seem like it's going to be decreasing anytime soon. So it's time to be aware of what these exposures are, where they're coming from, what they mean to our children's developing brains, immune systems, and hormones, and how we can live in a toxic world and still thrive. Because there's really honestly not a place in the world you can go where you or your kids are not going to be exposed. We can't live in a bubble because living in an isolated, lonely little bubble may be more inflammatory than any of the toxins we're exposed to. So let's look at what we can do from a proactive standpoint. So this is just an example. You have this, styrofoam plate of French fries on, a wood deck. So what's here? There's acrylamide, there's the ketchup with the high fructose corn syrup, there's the pesticides on the non-organic potatoes, there's the AGEs or the advanced glycosylated end products that are cancer causing in the fries, and then wood, there's arsenic is is treated on many wood, even think about baby cribs too that are wood that you want to make sure is tested for heavy metal and other toxic exposures, and styrene from the container. So back in 1969, Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring. And it's a book that really is worth picking up and having a read, because her alarm cry back in the early 60s was really something that we should have paid attention to then, and is absolutely critical that we pay attention to now. So she noted in her book that for the first time in the history of the world, every human being is now subjected to contact with dangerous chemicals from the moment of conception until death. In the less than 2 decades of their use, the synthetic pesticides have been so thoroughly distributed throughout the animate and inanimate world that they occur virtually everywhere. Now, back in the 1960s, the concern was mostly about these synthetic pesticides. There really was not a lot of information or education on these forever chemicals, these microplastics, all of these more, quote, modern toxins that are now facing us, in addition to all of the toxins that were around before. So we have in 1962, Silent Spring. Well, we didn't wake up enough then. Then in 2003, this is such an amazing book, Dr. Doris Rapp, who was really one of the pioneering pediatricians in, I would say, in kids' functional medicine, long before it was really called that, wrote Our Toxic World, a wake-up call, chemicals damage your body, brain, behavior, and sex. And then in 2009, this is I would say a more recent book, but still quite a while ago, Slow Death by Rubber Duck, The Secret Danger of Everyday Things. Now, again, these should have been wake-up calls. Even 2009, that's 15 years ago. So we need to continue to raise awareness, which is why I'm so grateful for Michael and hosting masterclasses like these. The Body Burden was a study commissioned by the Environmental Working Group in 2004 and looked at pesticides, chemical pollutants, environmental toxicants found in human umbilical cord blood, and found that there were at least 287 environmental toxicants that were found in human umbilical cord blood. 287. And of these, 180 were known to cause cancer in humans or animals. 217 were known to be toxic to the brain and nervous system, known to cause birth defects in animals, cause lung and breathing problems. The vast majority, 263, were known to harm the male and reproductive systems. Now, what's really striking is that many of the chemicals that were found in cord blood at that time had been banned since the 1970s, and we're still finding them in our mothers, in our babies. This was a study in 2006 that looked at babies in a hospital setting and found that nearly all of the babies tested for PFOA, which is a forever chemical. And when they looked at another study that looked at the cord blood found that cord blood had triclosan, flame retardants, detergents, and plasticizers. Now, what was really alarming for me in the study was that triclosan was found to be higher in cord blood than maternal blood. So we know that mothers have a certain level of toxic burden that they bring into their pregnancies, and there's just no way around it, right? But this makes it even more important when you can, with knowledge, even during your preconception, 6 months, 9 months, a year before trying to get pregnant and conceive, work with a practitioner who can help assess what your toxic burden is and lower it safely, because we can't detoxify while we're pregnant or while we're nursing. So the opportunity is really before you even conceive. Now, as you're listening, if you've had your baby and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I didn't know this. I didn't know that all of these toxins could be passed through the cord blood or through my breast milk. It's not too late. We can help really lower your child's toxic burden. It's just now being aware that we all have a toxic burden, and we all need to then live a life that helps promote detoxification every single day. Now, I mentioned toxins found in breast milk. In one recent study, 100% of the breast milk samples contained PFAS, these forever chemicals. And they looked at 4 different kinds of PFAS. There's probably others as well. And breast milk has also been found, of course, to have any other toxins. Most toxins that are in a mother's body are going to be excreted through her breast milk. And breastfeeding can actually lower a mom's toxic burden by over 20%. So again, that can be a startling number, startling fact. It is breastfeeding still outweighs the risks. There's so many benefits to the baby's gut microbiome, developing brain, so many protective factors for the baby, also protective and health factors for the mom. So this is not to say don't breastfeed. But this is to say, have some knowledge and understand what we can do to minimize our toxic levels. In Harm's Way was a report released by Physicians for Social Responsibility in 2000 and found that of the 2,863 chemicals that are produced every year at over 1 million pounds per year, the majority, over 3/4, had no data on pediatric developmental toxicity. And the alarming fact is that testing is not required by the Toxic Substances Control Act. We're kind of in this wild west where we have all of these toxins that are making our modern lives very convenient. But we have no idea what the long-term impacts are going to be. We don't want to wait till the studies come out. We know that there are impacts, and I'll discuss some of those shortly. So the time to act is now. We also know that toxins don't present in isolation. So if you have, let's say, a toy, that has some forever chemicals and it's a plastic toy, that maybe has some PFAS, in the toy. And chances are there's going to be some microplastics there. There may be some phthalates, there may be some parabens there. Toxins typically come together. Same thing as ultra-processed foods. It's not like there's just one toxin in ultra-processed foods. There are very likely multiple. And unfortunately, we don't have any data on the long-term synergistic effects of all the vast number of combinations of environmental chemicals and toxicants that our kids and us, frankly, as adults can be exposed to. Children have a unique vulnerability to toxins. Pound for pound, kids have more exposure relative to adults. What's fascinating is, really pound for pound, they eat 2 to 3 times more calories than an adult. They need to drink 5 to 7 times more water. They breathe 2 to 3 times more air. They absorb 2 to 3 times more through their skin, and they absorb 2 to 14 times more through their gut. Their skin and their gut lining is more permeable, or if you want to call it, more leaky than an adult's. And so they are just absorbing more from the same amount of exposure. They're absorbing more than an adult. And of course, they're constantly putting their hands in their mouth so that they get more exposure that way. Exposure begins at conception. Now, exposures during these critical times of brain, immune system, hormone development in utero, and then even postnatally in the early, 0 to 3 years of life, and then in your tween years, there's prepubertal years where hormones are changing. Those exposures during those times could have lifelong impacts that we don't see for decades. And so any problem that occurs, it's interesting. I had a conversation on an interview the other day, and the host was saying, well, it does seem that kids are more resilient, when they get exposed to, let's say, this crappy food that I might eat and feel terrible after, kids seem to bounce right back. That may look true because they don't yet have the same level of toxic burden that many adults have. The problem is, things can be simmering underneath with their immune system and with their brains and their hormones and metabolic processes. And then something, that their toxic burden doesn't overflow into symptoms until they're older. But we want to keep that bucket as low as possible. And that's why it's really important to, take the steps, no matter how old your kids are, to be able to decrease their exposures and their load of toxicity. They also have immature detoxification systems. Their livers are immature, their kidneys aren't detoxifying as well. And, many kids tend to be a little bit more selective in their eating and not taking in the nutrients that are really essential for detoxification. I would say many adults are probably insufficient too. So anything that I talk about today really also applies to adults as well. We also don't know the quote safe threshold of environmental toxins. And I do think that over time we're going to find that the levels we know that the Environmental Protection Agency does not consider certain levels of toxicants toxic that are known to be toxic to humans and to animals. But our understanding of safe has changed dramatically over time. Let's take the instance of blood lead levels. When I was in residency, I remember, we would check in San Francisco, a lot of old Victorian homes, a lot of lead paint. And so we often would find kids with some lead in their blood at the 1-year visit when we checked their blood work. Well, back in the 90s, a level of 10 micrograms per deciliter of whole blood lead was considered quote, fine. It wasn't considered problematic. Back in the 60s, a level of 60 was considered okay. Now, fast forward, we know there is no safe blood lead level. So ideally, we would have no levels. And I would say that's true for any environmental toxicant. But again, in our modern world, it's impossible to get to zero, but let's get to as low as possible. And, as I mentioned before, these synergistic effects of toxins, there is an organization called Little Things Matter, started by Dr. Bruce Lanphier, a pediatrician in Canada. And he has amazing videos to really help parents and practitioners understand, the impact of our children's body burden of chemical pollutants. So this is I guess it's called a chart, a chart I made up to try to synthesize what we know about these endocrine disruptors. And, I'm focusing on forever chemicals, these PFASs, that's why that's in the orange. But these known endocrine disruptors, these hormone disruptors, there's bisphenol A and all of its variants, there's phthalates, parabens and all of its variants, and all the different kinds of PFASs, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Well, this is what we know in the literature on the impacts on children specifically. All of these, we're going to discuss shortly, can impact the kids' microbiomes and cause gut dysbiosis. Many impact blood sugar regulation, increased weight gain, tendency to metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and type 1 diabetes. Altered thyroid response, PCOS in girls, infertility in boys and girls, carcinogenic potential. And so you can increase risk for food and environmental allergies and eczema and asthma, which are significantly on the rise. Behavioral problems with anxious, shy behavior in girls, hyperactivity in boys. In boys, we have altered testosterone production. In girls, we have, with delayed puberty, we often see in boys. In girls, we see early puberty because many of these mimic estrogen production. And this is also a list of where some of these are commonly found. Now, when you look to see how they're eliminated, the really nice thing you would say about the BPAs, phthalates, and parabens are that they are rapidly excreted in urine. So if you can lower your exposure levels of bisphenols, phthalates, parabens, which we can easily by choosing not to buy plastics. Never heat up foods in plastics. Look at your cosmetics, make sure, and your skincare products, and make sure that they don't have any of these parabens listed here. When you buy cans, make sure that they don't have can linings that contain bisphenol A, and ideally none of the other types of bisphenols. If we lower our exposures, then we get rid of them quickly in our urine. The problem with forever chemicals is that we don't excrete them efficiently. They're not very well excreted in our urine. Sweat is not an efficient way. Sweat does not get rid of forever chemicals, so going into a sauna is going to do nothing to reduce your forever chemical burden. What's fascinating is that menstrual blood. So we actually can excrete some of our forever chemicals through blood. And so, perhaps is that maybe a protective factor for some of our girls and some of our women. But unfortunately, there's not, very efficient metabolism and excretion, and they have very, very long biological half-lives, up to 35 years, which is why some people call which is why they're called forever chemicals, because they last forever in our soil and, in our products, our manufactured products, and they can seemingly last forever in our bodies. So this is just pulling out from there the main sources of endocrine disruptors that you can kind of take a screenshot if you would like, just to go back to for reference. And there are so many online references as well. So why are they so disruptive? We know that endocrine disruptors can disrupt our hormone levels, both boys and girls. We know that endocrine disruptors can either mimic male and female hormones and wreak their havoc in that way, or bind to male and female hormone receptors and cause hormonal imbalance in that way. They may even actually create novel, new hormone receptors. So that's part of it. But what is at the root? I would really, say, and my conjecture is that the root cause of all of this is that these endocrine disrupting chemicals truly are microbiome disrupting chemicals. And we know that for children especially, all health really does start in the gut. In fact, in my book, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, you'll notice on the cover there's a blue burst that says why your child's microbiome holds the key to lifelong wellness. It is so important for your child's developing immune systems, brains, hormones, metabolic processes, whether they're infants, whether they're toddlers, or whether they're teens and tweens. Now, our hormones and endocrine disruptors and gut microbiome have an intimate connection. There is something called the endobolome, which is our microbiota, right? The bugs in our gut, and all of their genes and pathways that are involved in metabolizing our sex hormones, our steroid hormones. So these are the microbiota that we have. If they are probiotics, right, are beneficial flora, they efficiently will allow excretion of the hormones that our liver has already processed to try to get out through our stool. When our gut microbiome is not healthy and we have dysbiotic organisms, that the work that your liver has done to, quote, detoxify the abnormal levels of sex hormones and get them out into your stool, those pathogenic flora can then deconjugate those hormones, basically undo the work that your liver has done, and then we reabsorb those toxic hormones back into our bodies. So that's where when we talk about the, quote, bad estrogen levels really accumulating in women, increasing the risk of certain cancers like breast cancers, it really stems from understanding how to support your liver's detoxification and also healthy gut microbes to support healthy stool excretion. And it's a two-way street. The levels of male and female sex hormones that we have are affected by gut microbial diversity and composition. On the flip side, our gut microbiota composition and diversity also affects the levels of our male and female sex hormones. It is a two-way street, as I mentioned. Endocrine disruptors can in turn affect your microbial diversity and function, literally directly trigger gut dysbiosis or abnormal balance of beneficial and pathogenic flora in your gut microbiome, and increase intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And then gut dysbiosis can also then further metabolize these endocrine disruptors that caused the disruption in the first place into more toxic compounds that get absorbed and wreak their havoc on our bodies and your children's bodies. So it's hard to know what comes first. Is it that your child's gut microbiome is disrupted and that leads to more endocrine disrupting chemical absorption, which then leads to more gut dysbiosis and leaky gut, which further compounds the situation, or did the endocrine disruptors come first? It doesn't matter. When we're looking at endocrine disruptors and toxicity, we need to look at both. We need to look at the toxic burden and also look at what's going on with your child's gut microbiome. Now, we know that endocrine disruptors can affect our and our children's gut microbiomes significantly. Forever chemicals, phthalates, parabens, triclosan, any number of endocrine disruptors, even heavy metals, which are considered endocrine disruptors, have been found to significantly increase the numbers of pathogenic bacteria in your gut and decrease the levels of beneficial bacteria. What's interesting in one study, this study found that maternal exposure to endocrine disruptors did affect babies' microbiomes through the placenta and also through breast milk, with differential infant microbiomes at 6 weeks of life and even at 1 year of life. So this is in utero. So again, pointing to, ideally we would have all mamas and papas. I'm not going to, have dads out of this as well, because we're finding that even dads' microbiome and toxic exposures are absolutely affecting babies in utero and postnatal outcomes. So trying to reduce your toxic exposures before you even get pregnant. But it is what it is now. We know that there's significant disruption to your child's gut microbiome. And many of these endocrine disruptors, in fact, that one article that discusses the endobolome, the researchers really are calling for endocrine disruptors to be called microbiome disrupting chemicals, to shift our focus on just the impact to our hormones, because we know that endocrine disruptors have effects way beyond our hormones. Go back to that graph that I made. I mean, there's not just hormonal impacts, there's neurodevelopmental impacts, there's immune impacts, all of the epigenetic changes. And Dr. Alessio Fasano is a gastroenterologist in Boston who is credited with saying that the gut microbiome is not like Las Vegas. What happens in the microbiome does not stay in the microbiome. We know that especially for children, that any disruption to the gut microbiome can have significant impacts on their developing immune system connections, with increased risks for allergy, asthma, eczema, autoimmunity, significant impacts on their gut-brain connections, with increased risks for autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression. And we know that the effects of endocrine disruptors are transgenerational, that the impacts to mother's gut microbiome and her vaginal microbiome and her breast milk glands microbiomes will then have impacts on the baby, which then has impacts on our baby's babies, and so on and so on. So this is the article I was talking about with the endobolome, pointing to the fact that, yes, there are hormone microbiome impacts that then significantly impact the gut microbiome, with dysbiosis and leaky gut leading to a whole host of hormonal problems, but then also all of these other ripple effects on virtually every single organ system in our body. Oops. And this is a list of the known endocrine disruptors that have microbiome disrupting effects. We have our pesticides, our glyphosate, our bisphenols, phthalates, heavy metals I mentioned, triclosan, parabens, PBDEs, and our forever chemicals. And when we think about what our kids are exposed to, that really disrupt their microbiome from birth, it's not just endocrine disrupting chemicals. It's really all of these other factors. We know medications, not just antibiotics, but medications like ibuprofen, reflux medications, antihistamines, steroids, birth control pills, SSRI antidepressant medications, ultra-processed foods with food additives and added sugars and artificial chemicals, EMFs or electromagnetic frequencies, psychological stress, and lifestyle stress all contribute, all disrupt your child's microbiome. And they're what I called our modern microbiome mischief makers. And when we look at these, how many of these are our kids and teens exposed to? How many are we exposed to as adults? So wherever we can, when we take a look at this, let's take a look at where we can impact. Well, we can reduce our load of environmental toxicants. Sometimes medications are necessary, but if we're on microbiome disrupting medications, we need to be aware of that and support our gut microbiome. We can choose organic as much as possible. We can choose whole, real foods, minimally processed foods. We can lower our EMF exposures, and we can work on optimizing our psychological and lifestyle factors. So many of these. So bottom line, we can impact. We can actually do something about these. And so that's the message I want to give to our kids. So, but it can seem kind of hopeless. When these toxins are everywhere, what are the concrete steps that we can do? Because it's one thing to say, sure, we can lower these and sure, we can reduce our toxic burden, but what are the concrete steps? We need to make these actionable, doable, and practical. They have to be a part of our everyday lives. And my question, and I really do believe, that microbiome resilience is the key to thriving in our toxin-filled world. And when we think about toxins in our kids, remember, our kids are exposed to toxins from the moment they're conceived. So they face a lifetime of chronic ongoing exposure to environmental toxicants. I would argue that this really goes against the routine use of really aggressive detox measures that rapidly remove toxins in our kids who are not acutely ill or symptomatic. Now, if you have a child with a significant health concern, it may be that we are doing more of a detox protocol. But even then, I would say, aggressive is not really the way to go for our children. And regardless, the key is to make detoxification a lifestyle. This is a must. We have to minimize our kids' exposure to environmental toxicants. We have to lay the foundations for gut microbiome resilience, which really is our children's greatest ally in thriving in our modern world. We have to optimize diet and lifestyle to support detox and elimination, and optimize vagus nerve function for optimal detox support. This is really key. So when we're making detox a lifestyle, we have to think about how to minimize exposures to toxins before they get in, right? We want to make sure that our load is as low as possible. So again, before you conceive, awesome. That would be great. Before pregnancy, lowering mama's toxic burden, optimizing maternal and paternal gut microbiomes, and reducing maternal psychological stress. The relationship between psychological stress and vagus nerve functioning and overall toxicity cannot be ignored. This is very key to healing, reversing, and preventive chronic disease in children and adults. And it's often something that we don't pay enough attention to. But I would say it is really up there, maybe the most important thing that we need to pay attention to. One study found that prenatal exposure to endocrine disruptors had the same dysregulating effect on the baby's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal stress axis as prenatal psychological stress. There is the same impact on the baby's physiologic response to stress. And there's conjecture that when you have prenatal endocrine disrupting chemical exposure and significant prenatal psychological stress, that those two together can be additive and even synergistic and really compound the impact on your baby's developing stress response. So really supporting moms through pregnancy, through delivery, postpartum is really important. We want to minimize what toxins we get in from our food and our drink, and many of you know this, right? I'm going to point out, a heavy metal exposure. One surprising area where people don't necessarily think of heavy metal exposure is through processed cheese, cheese strings. Those any of our processed cheese, shredded cheese that you buy in a bag. Many are processed with aluminum. The way they're processed accumulate aluminum. So things like, your DiGiorno frozen pizza has been found to have high aluminum levels because of the cheese. So when you're buying cheese, it's so much better to buy a block of, organic cheddar cheese, shred it yourself, and not have the processed shredded cheese that has all of the different ingredients that prevent it from caking. And popcorn, microwave popcorn, no microwave popcorn, please. A very high source of forever chemicals. We also want to minimize our non-food exposures to our environmental toxicants. And so these are just some suggestions. Cookware, really important to use non-coated non-stick cookware, and choose stainless steel, cast iron, ceramic cookware options. Being aware of the toxins that may be in your in your children's toys, in your clothes, reducing EMF exposure. These are some potential sources of heavy metals. We all think about mercury in fish, but knowing that rice and apple juice can have arsenic. Chicken, often non-organic chicken, is often fed arsenic as an antimicrobial. And think about our cosmetics. What your teens and tween girls who are really, or boys who are really into cosmetics, it is worth the investment to get them clean makeup that is not laden with heavy metals. Water filters. I know, Michael talks a lot about water filters. And so there's there have been a couple of water filters that have been identified by the Environmental Working Group that can remove forever chemicals. And because water is a huge source of not just forever chemicals, but other environmental pollutants. So, doing your research on what kind of water filter you may want to use for your home. And then when we think about optimizing diet and lifestyle to support detoxification and elimination, we want to prioritize sulfur-rich foods, those stinky foods, those cruciferous vegetables. Why? Because those enhance your glutathione levels. Glutathione is our master antioxidant, which is really important for detoxifying just about anything. One study did show that in garden soil that was contaminated with forever chemicals, that these floret vegetables like cauliflower and broccoli did take in more forever chemicals than other garden vegetables. This is not to say do not buy and eat floret vegetables, because they're so important for detoxification and so healthy for your immune system. It's just to really understand, we want to try to, work with our local farmers and, of course, really have sustainable regenerative farming practices so that our soil is not contaminated. That is why so much of our food now is just naturally contaminated by the uptake of heavy metals and environmental toxins through their roots in the soil and the water that is nurturing them. Epsom salt baths are a great way to increase your glutathione levels. Epsom salts are magnesium sulfate. The magnesium is calming and relaxing, and then the sulfate is going to improve glutathione levels. And then supplements. I do, will incorporate supplements as needed. Glutathione is a supplement that I use. I use liposomal glutathione or Cetria glutathione. These are forms of glutathione that are more easily absorbed. Methylation support is really important for our hormones and for our detoxification processes. These include methylfolate, methyl B12, choline. In fact, methylation nutrients can reduce the adverse epigenetic impacts of forever chemicals while you're pregnant to your offspring. So that is really, really key. We can't get rid of all of our forever chemicals and toxins that we're exposed to, our BPAs. But while you're pregnant, if you're taking a really healthy amount of methylfolate, methyl B12, choline, vitamin B6, all of our methylation factors, that has been shown to actually reverse and prevent the negative impact of endocrine disruptors to your offspring. Mitochondrial support is really important because we know forever chemicals can cause mitochondrial dysfunction. So those include things like CoQ10, ribose, or carnitine. These are supplements that I will incorporate more commonly in kids who have chronic health concerns, where I want to support all of their processes to help make sure detoxification is happening efficiently. And of course, we need to keep the routes of elimination wide open. How do we eliminate? We pee, poop, sweat, and sleep. Okay, sleep is a really important elimination detoxification route as well. So we need to make sure our kids are peeing, pooping, sweating, and sleeping optimally every day. These are some examples of our top sulfur-rich foods. Epsom salt baths are here because they increase our sulfur content and not because we eat them. But it's our cruciferous vegetables and also mushrooms, garlic, onions, asparagus, and spinach. So load those in. Now, when we think about making detox a lifestyle, we also have to think about how to create gut microbiome resilience. So we're going to focus on endocrine disruptors and what that means to create a foundation of gut microbiome resilience so that your kids' microbiomes and their brains, immune systems, and hormones are resilient no matter what they're exposed to in life. So in my book, I talk about the 5 things for microbiome magic, and it's a wheel of whole gut resilience. There are 5 things that we do every single day, and if we learn how to do them like a gut hero, we can create all sorts of microbiome magic, and we can create resilience against not just endocrine disruptors, but against, microbiome disrupting medications and psychological stress and, all of those food colors and artificial sweeteners and too much sugar and dyes that your kids are invariably going to be exposed to. So it's all about creating resilience. We're going to focus on Nourish, part 1, okay, how we eat. And there's so much more though. Okay. We're going to also quickly touch upon, how we breathe or engage our vagus nerve, move, hydrate, and sleep for microbiome magic. The gut reset is the protocol I use for returning your child's microbiome back to health if they have gut dysbiosis and leaky gut. And that's, in part 3 of my book, I talk about how to really know if your kids may have gut microbiome disruption and run through the gut reset protocol. But for now, we're going to talk about how do we really build up that resilience. So when we nourish your child's microbiome, the key is to reducing absorption, enhancing degradation, and mitigating or preventing the effects of endocrine disrupting chemicals. So this means getting in your microbiome champions. So the whole gut rainbow, okay, is what I call it, with the 3 Fs: fiber, phytonutrients, which I know is a PH, but it sounds like an F, and fermented foods. If we focus on these 3 Fs that nurture your gut microbiome, then you're giving your gut microbiome the beneficial probiotics, all the things that they need to grow and thrive so that they can help your kid and they can help us grow and thrive. Now, one thing you'll notice is microbiome champions, they're all plants. Okay. Now, we know fiber can actually help increase gut excretion of forever chemicals. In fact, for every, quartile increase in fiber consumption, there was a significant decrease in the levels of PFOA, PFOS, and PFNA. These are different kinds of forever chemicals. We also know that inulin to mice, this is an animal study, inulin fed to mice, and pectin, these are prebiotics that feed, and they're prebiotic fibers that feed your gut microbiome. Well, these were found to lower significantly serum, so blood, forever chemical levels, and also reduce the forever chemical accumulation in the liver. Now, we do have a fiber gap worldwide. In the US, only 5% of people meet the recommended fiber intake. So we have to mindfully get in fiber at every single meal. Now, the truth is, the more ultra-processed foods you eat, the lower the fiber intake there's going to be in those foods. So again, going back to those, whole, minimally processed foods. This here is a table of the recommended daily fiber intake for kids and for adults by sex. And it seems like it shouldn't be that hard to do. When we see that the Tanzania's Hadza people, which have some of the world's richest gut microbial diversity, they average about 100 to 150 grams of daily fiber. So getting in as a kid, 25 grams of daily fiber shouldn't be that hard. But the Tanzania's Hadza people don't eat any processed foods. So we want to really make it concrete and say, look at all of these foods that are filled with fiber. And don't forget your tan brown foods. This is a rainbow of fiber, the colors of fiber. But our seeds, nuts, legumes, whole grains are all really, really rich in fiber and pack the biggest fiber punch per bite. So when you're having, your oatmeal in the morning, that's awesome. Oatmeal is going to be high in fiber, but why not sprinkle some sunflower seeds and some sliced almonds to make it even more fiber filled, and throw in some raspberries, which are really high in fiber. Make it really concrete. I give parents this handout too, and this table is actually in my book as well, just to give examples. In fact, there's a much more expanded table of the fiber content in foods. So people know, wow, a cup of raspberries. My kids could actually down 2 cups of raspberries easy in one sitting. And 1 cup of raspberries actually has 9 grams of fiber. What's interesting is cooked carrots have more fiber than raw carrots. Brown rice has more fiber than white rice because white rice is more processed, right? The brown outer part of the rice is what has the protein, the fiber, and all of those awesome nutrients. This study in teens found that teens who ate higher amounts of fruit and fiber had lower levels of forever chemicals. And also, there was a relationship between inverse, so an opposite relationship. The higher the levels of folate, where's folate from? Folate is from your green leafy vegetables and other vegetables. So the higher the folate level, the lower your forever chemical levels, significantly lower. And phytonutrients, these are all the different colors that foods can come in. Each color has a different benefit. And these phytonutrients, also called polyphenols, can also have a protective effect against the endocrine disrupting effects of all of your environmental chemicals. These are just some of environmental toxicants here, and the polyphenols that have been found to be protective. So quercetin, I love quercetin, found in the skin of red apples, purple grapes, red onions, capers, arugula. There's curcumin. There's EGCG from green tea, resveratrol from grapes. So you can get all of these from food. Genistein is from soy products. And so getting in color is really important. And fermented foods, our third microbiome champion. So fermented foods was also found to be inversely associated. The higher the the higher the fermented food intake, the lower the forever chemical levels. And probiotics found in a variety of fermented foods have been found to be able to break down, degrade forever chemical and other environmental pollutant levels, and also reduce their absorption and mitigate their adverse effects. So get your fermented foods in. So much benefit to them. There's one drinkable yogurt drink that you've probably seen on the market. That this one was actually specifically studied to be protective against BPA and reduce intestinal absorption and blood concentrations of bisphenol A after ingestion, and also increase your stool excretion of bisphenol A. So, okay, eat more fruits and vegetables, right? I mean, that sounds simple enough. Well, 1 in 2 kids today doesn't eat any vegetables on any given day, and 1 in 3 kids doesn't eat any fruit on any given day. So I hear you as parents if you're saying, I don't know, how am I going to get my kids to eat more fruits and vegetables? Well, I have some tips and tricks in the book. One thing we also know about color, okay, we have our fruit and vegetable, and fiber gap. We have a color gap in every single color. 8 in 10 Americans doesn't, get enough color in every single color. All right. So how do we get them to eat more plants? I have some tips and tricks for the pickiest eaters in the book, but this is a whole gut rainbow handout that is a resource. You guys can take a screenshot too, but it is a downloadable resource. Print this out, put it on your fridge. These are all of our microbiome champions that would be great to focus on. What I have kids and parents to do is just take a look and see, okay, what are, the handful of items on this list that we want to put into our shopping cart for the week and incorporate into our meal planning. So get your kids involved with the meal planning and the cooking. And then we want to count our plants. So I talk about making every meal pop with plants on purpose. And it's so cute when you talk to little kids about making it pop. I had this one little girl who was listening to me speaking and as her mom was listening about making meals pop. And you just think, what's one more way you can add one plant, just one more plant to everything you're eating? I already mentioned the oatmeal. Could we add sunflower seeds? They're probably in your cupboard right now. Just pull them out. Or, if you're making chili with maybe kidney beans and some ground turkey. Well, what about adding some chickpeas to that? You just added one more. Spices count, so adding turmeric or adding cinnamon, all of that counts. So how do we make it pop? And so this little girl, afterwards, as mom was making dinner, she ran up to her mom and was like, hey, Mom, are we going to make it pop? So we want to make everything memorable, actionable, doable, and also fun, because if it's not fun, your kids aren't going to do it. And this also works for our teenagers too. So final thing, hydrating, moving, and sleeping. We have to optimize our elimination pathways, open up those routes of elimination. Remember that blood is a source of PFAS elimination, menstrual blood for girls, but that's not an option for boys. So we want to, make sure we're hydrated, so we're urinating. Remember, urine is a really good way of excretion for parabens, phthalates, and bisphenols. But even our poop and our sweat and our sleep is really important. Hydration is another microbiome. 5 things for microbiome magic. Hydration helps pee, poop, and sweat. So 3 routes of elimination. Most endocrine disruptors are eliminated in our urine. Unfortunately, not forever chemicals, but at least half of kids and probably adults don't drink enough water. What's interesting is that higher water drinkers have been found to eat more fruits and vegetables and also have different gut microbiomes than lower water drinkers. And what do you want to drink? We want to drink water. No sugar added, or you can have no sugar added coconut water. The 2 hydration packets that I like are Cure and Ultima Replenisher. There are others, but please, none of the drinks with the artificial dyes or too much sugar or artificial sweeteners. This is really important. We don't want to replace what they're drinking when we're trying to eliminate toxins with toxic drinks. And filter your water. Don't use plastics. Don't use plastic water bottles. Use a reusable stainless steel or glass water bottle. How much water should your kids drink? Well, you take their body weight in pounds, divide that in half, and that's about the number of ounces of water they should drink on a normal day. So let's say a 50-pound kiddo, they should have about maybe 25 ounces of water. If they have a 12-ounce water bottle, make it even more concrete. Tell your kids, let's fill this water bottle twice and have at least that. And just really, we want to make it concrete for our kids. Of course, if it's really sweaty, if they get really sweaty, it's super hot during the day, then they need to drink even more water. Moving. Sweat can eliminate a lot of toxins, just not forever chemicals. So we want to sweat. We want to move our bodies. And exercise actually has a benefit on our microbiome independent of diet. So even if your kids are not the most varied eaters yet, you want to keep moving in a fun way. There's so many positive benefits of exercise. Just for your whole body and brain, but especially to your microbiome. And unfortunately, though, you have to keep moving. So you want to exercise, make it a family affair. Go for a brisk walk after dinner every single night. Everything counts. And sleeping. Our environmental toxins can disrupt sleep, and then sleep disturbance also disrupts our ability to clear toxins from our brain via something called our glymphatic system. The glymphatic system is our unique brain's detoxification system that clears out toxins during our sleep. In fact, it is 10 times more active during our sleep than when we're awake. And our brain cells shrink by about 60% to get rid of toxins more efficiently. So we need sleep to heal and detox. And sleep deprivation is known also to trigger gut microbiome dysbiosis. Also, mitochondrial dysfunctions, brain dysfunction. I mean, sleep and exercise are, two of the most important medicines that I can prescribe to a patient. The disruption to our gut microbiome occurs just within 48 hours of sleep deprivation. And it does take about a week of sleep recovery to restore your microbiome, which is why, when you're traveling and jet lagged, it takes longer to get back to a healthier state than we often think. This is a minimum number of hours that your kids should be getting with sleep. So, really, really aiming for that. It's not just time in bed, it is time asleep. And every kiddo has different sleep needs, but this is really the minimum that we want for our kids. Support and protect sleep. Turn off the light on your screen. I mean, ideally no screens an hour or two before bedtime. Before teenagers with homework, that can be really hard, but no phones in the room. Keep the phones out of the room, and use the night shift modes for your screens. I do incorporate sleep supports as needed. In my book, I list some more supports for insomnia, night waking, sleep disturbances. But these are some of the main ones I use. Phosphatidylserine are to reduce that wired going mind at night, helps to quiet the mind, reduce excess cortisol. Melatonin can help fall asleep. Inositol can help stay asleep. I use homeopathic remedies like Coffea cruda for that wired mind and body, and Ignatia for when worries or grief are making it difficult to fall asleep. As with any of these, though, if you're needing these sleep supports, I always look for the root cause, though. When your kids are needing melatonin every night to help them fall asleep, well, guess what? Your gut microbiome makes 400 times the melatonin that your brain does. So if you're having trouble falling asleep, there's a lack of melatonin going on. You have to support the gut microbiome in order to make appropriate levels of melatonin for your child's needs. And last but not least, vagus nerve function for detox support. Now, heart rate variability is a marker of vagus nerve function, and it is one of the best predictors of current and future health. One of the things we know is that children's heart rate variabilities has been steadily decreasing over the decades. And we also know that endocrine disruptors can reduce heart rate variability. So we have all of these forces acting to lower our vagus nerve functioning, and we need to optimize our vagus nerve function in order to have optimal health for a lifetime. So what can we do? We can really work on the tools that we know that can improve heart rate variability. There's not one right or wrong heart rate variability. Many people, including myself, will track our heart rate variability. On my Oura Ring, your Apple Watch will track heart rate variability. But again, is one of the best predictors of current and future health. What's fascinating is that working on your vagus nerve and working on heart rate variability has been found to improve and increase microbiome diversity in children independent of diet. So even if, again, changing diet is one of the hardest things to do, work on exercise, work on vagus nerve. There's so many ways that we have, and many, many free ways that we have to optimize vagus nerve function. This is an essential prescription. So belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, practicing gratitude and loving kindness, laughing, chanting, humming, singing, gargling, EFT tapping, acupuncture, cognitive behavioral tools, of course, mindfulness and meditation. And I have a resource in my book on all of the different ways that I support vagus nerve functioning in kids. Essential oils can also improve heart rate variability. Now, in the literature, lavender and sandalwood have been shown to improve heart rate variability, but there's so many other essential oils that can reduce anxiety and promote sensations of calm, including lavender and our citrus essential oils. And then acupuncture. I teach acupressure to parents. And so you can stimulate these various points that can stimulate your vagus nerve, which is amazing. So there's an ear point called Shenmen that I love, that you can put they're crystal acupuncture seeds that you can put onto that point and just have your child massage that point. It's very calming. You can get a little electric stim device. As a practitioner, some parent, I don't know that I would have parents do that, but that can stimulate these points here. This Shenmen point on the ear, point 0, this sympathetic point, all have been found to improve heart rate variability. I do use other devices. This is an Apollo Neuro that's been found in kids to reduce their ADHD and anxiety symptoms, has been found to improve heart rate variability. There's other devices that are now in the market. In fact, there's one device out of Canada that's been approved by Health Canada to treat long COVID. And Michael and I were talking offline about a device that I've been using now as well, called the Truvaga device. So I think we will see on the market now more devices that have the evidence behind them that they can improve heart rate variability. So that is my talk for today. Everyone can be a gut hero. We can create microbiome resilience for a lifetime of health for our kids and for ourselves, even in our modern world.
Fantastic as always. Thank you so much. Always over-delivering. There was so much in there about endocrine disrupting chemicals and the intertwining between endocrine disrupting chemicals and the gut microbiome I find fascinating. And I have been kind of the host, and I don't know what else to call it, but I'm working with Kiran Krishnan right now on a microbiome course that we're running with him. And there is so much overlap between what you were teaching and like handouts I've been making and charts. And I was like, man, I came up with these all on my own. I thought I was coming up with original ideas, but the overlap was striking. And it's, I didn't know that endocrine disrupting chemicals have such an impact on the microbiome. Usually it's just talked about hormone levels, but it doesn't talk about how it gets there to the hormones and the reason that it gets to the hormones. Because hormones are like a canary in the coal mine. They're not they're the thing that responds to all the things that are wrong. They're not the cause usually. And so it's more the sign that things are wrong. And I never saw it broken down to where it gets to like, how do these chemicals actually do this? And it makes tons of sense. I don't have any questions. I have 4 pages of notes that look like this. This is how I take notes. I wrote some ADD notes because I have ADD, and I heard you mention that a couple times, and I was like, I got to try that thing. So, there's like little arrows and signs and chart, and so I love it. I can make sense of this later. But thank you so much, and guys, for serious, check out the book. It's like a how-to manual for kids, and if you want them to be healthy, and there's nothing that's not in there that I could ever think of, and it's so comprehensive and helpful. So thank you so much. As always, super appreciate your time and such amazing depth of content. People could watch this one over and over and over and pick out more and more things, and always over and above. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you for doing this. It's so important to get the information out, and I love how dedicated you are to really bring information to people everywhere.
Thanks.